Welcome to this new episode of VonCam, where we'll be talking about the Minox Classic Leica M3 camera. Very interesting digicam, definitely lo-fi. Its history basically was Leica bought Minox's photo section in 1996, and they decided to create first a third size replica of Leica and Rolei cameras using the Minox film. Then in 2002, they put a sensor inside, a 1.3 megapixel CMOS sensor. I didn't find any documentation if it was really a CMOS, but that's all I found. In 2004, they upscaled the image to 4 megapixel, probably a 3.2 megapixel sensor, and the internal memory was up to 32 megabytes, but no screen like the first version. And in 2006, that's the 2006 version, they upscaled to 5 megapixel the original file of 3.2 megapixel, which was the sensor size, but added also the SD card. Here is a compartment for the SD card and actually a removable battery, but quite a modern twist for this weird small digicam. You can recharge it from USB, which for the time was kind of interesting. Quite smart, actually. And yeah, worked pretty well. The focus, it's a focus-free lens. You have focus, you can change the focus. Basically, it goes from 0.5 meter to 2 meter, and because it's the depth of field is really weird. It's basically almost everything in focus up to infinity when you're at 2 meter. Is it a 28 millimeter equivalent? I'm not sure. But then, yeah, not much more to say about it. You can do crappy video with it, 320 by 240, which is basically useless. And if you want to go into the menus, I took kind of weird menus. Here it goes. That's to review images. And then we can go here. Even to turn it off, you have to go through menus. Here's the power off menu choice. Then you can format, auto off, basic settings. You can actually change the quality of low light captures, but nothing really interesting here. You can play with it, it's kind of experimental. And then to power off and select, you have to press the shutter here and it turns off. So not much to say. It's really an experimental camera more than anything else. The quality is going to be pretty bad, but interesting nonetheless. And let's go see some pictures. If we start with one well-lit, not too contrasty photo, that's in my kitchen. There's some angles. So, and you do a relatively good focus, that's what you get. It's really hard with the screen to check the focus, so you'll go a little bit by luck. As you can see on the image on the left, it's kind of okay. The geometry is fine. Actually, nice rendering, interesting rendering. I won't go too nice for such a small camera of the time. Relatively, yeah, interesting. There's a digital zoom. I didn't mention it before. That's the picture on the right when I'm at maximum. So basically, the first image that's already interpolated, it's already upscaled, is even more upscaled. So you get this really grainy, weird, compressed image. Not sure at the time it was very interesting. But nonetheless, you get that option and this very characteristic grainy image. If I replace the picture on the right and move the camera, that's where it gets a little bit problematic or creative. It depends on your point of view. Once you get light in the lens is pretty bad. You will have those sort of hazy light leaks and all kinds of flares and things coming out of that weird lens. But again, it's really got a very specific personality coming out. When you get to contrasty scenes, like here outside on a sunny day, the sensor is really bad, as is the lens with highlights. So you'll really quickly saturate the sensor and get those weird white, no signal zones. Here, I'm not in a really good focus. Actually, even on those two pictures, it's pretty hard to get the focus right. Even so, the depth of field is so big. But what we can see here is basically the characteristics of the image in highlights. Also, there's a swirly bokeh interesting. We can see it on the periphery of the picture. And also here we can see it on the picture on the left. The highlights, there's something in the compression, the image treatment, which makes those weird zones kind of coalesce. It's kind of organic, even though it's weird. But yeah, interesting rendering. It's really a camera that grew on me. It's definitely not one of my main cameras, but it's a fun tool like a Lomo camera to carry around. Here on the right, you can see that even if you tried to manage highlights, you actually can't do much. There's no real settings. You can underexpose by default in the settings, but that's all you can do. One thing I really found interesting is when you start modifying the files. There's no raw file coming out of this camera, but the JPEGs have weirdly some detail in the lowlights. And here, the picture on the left, that's what comes out of the camera. As you can see, when the focus is right, not too much light, you do get nice details and nice colors in the sky and the clouds. But the underexposed regions, if you push them up, you really get those weird colors and details, which actually are quite artistic, in my opinion. It depends what kind of photography you like. Another example here, the lowlights actually have tons of details. Very grainy, kind of, yeah, a bit bitmapped, and there's not so many levels of color, but you do get the strong personality of this camera. Here again, the lowlights, if you push them, you can really get something interesting. Very lo-fi, very of the period. And yeah, that's why this camera is actually, in my opinion, an interesting tool, quite unique. Here again, when it goes for in low light situations, slow captures will show you this kind of kinetic blur, but very interesting nonetheless. And the picture on the right, you get the drama of high contrast situations. Really interesting. But for my use of this camera, I really went in for that personality in low lights. So here are two examples. When you start manipulating the JPEGs, you really get some interesting hues, like those magentas, those greens, some orange, and very, very strange rendering of scenes, but you get something unique again here. So if you're into experimental photography using old digicams, I think this is a really unique camera in that sense. Between the lens and the sensor, as you can see here, you get those weird colors, those weird compression artifacts. And even the lens, there's something kind of lo-fi analog of a certain era. But a no compromise camera in that sense. And also for macro photography, you can't do it, but because of all those elements in the image creation, the image science that was included in this camera, you can get those weird images. And obviously, I don't put usually portraits of people in my presentations, but you can imagine what it does for scenes with humans in it, portraits, portraitures, candid photography. Really an interesting camera to have on you. It's really tiny, fun to use. It's more like a toy, but you'll get something out of it that's definitely out of the ordinary. So hopefully that was entertaining. Maybe you'll try it yourself if you find one. And if you have comments, questions, or other suggestions, don't hesitate as usual, and catch you next time.